In January, more than 150 local officials and community members helped launch Clark County's Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. Recently, we sat down with the Honorable Scott Collier, Clark County Superior Court Judge, and Pat Escamilla, Clark County Juvenile Court Administrator, to learn what steps can be taken to reduce the number of low-risk youth that are being detained at great expense and with unintended negative consequences.
Hello, I'm Jim Demo with Clark County CLOSO. Thank you both for meeting with us.
Thank you for having us.
Pat, let's start with you. First, how many juveniles were held in the Justice Center last year?
Last year we had 2,300 admissions into our facility, and not all kids are held, but they come through, get processed, booked and released, or booked into our detention center.
And what are the age ranges?
Generally, you're talking 12 to 17, and with a handful of 18-year-olds. So those kids are still on jurisdiction, so they might have a violation. So we do have 18-year-olds.
Was there an average kind of stay?
Last year we had average length of stay of 7 days. Currently we have some kids that are in there for 50-some days and they're waiting adjudication, but it's generally about 7 days.
And about how many are in the jail right now? Not the jail, I'm sorry, the Juvenile Justice Center.
Yeah, right now we have 30 kids in our facility. The population fluctuates. We can have anywhere from 50 in 1 week and down to 25 another.
And what's it like in there? Is it like a jail, for example?
Well, it really is. It's a jail for juveniles.
Okay.
There are some differences, though. I mean, there's classrooms back there because they have educational programs. They have exercise facility that they really don't have in the adult jail. The staffing, the whole mentality of how they work with them and interact with them is different than a jail. But if you walked in and saw the actual physical structure, it would look much like a jail. Fairly nice one because it's only a 12-year-old facility.
Okay. Now, how about the juvenile court system? How is it different than
The emphasis more with juveniles is towards rehabilitation and accountability, trying to prevent them from going on and leading that criminality type lifestyle and having problems as adults. So we work a lot more, and that's why these programs and other programs that we have are to prevent problems for the future. So it's accountability, making amends, and recognize their responsibility to the community for the harms that they've caused, where adult jails are much more about just kind of punishment, accountability, and sometimes in the DOC, Department of Corrections prison system, as they're leaving, they may have some programs, but it's much more about just housing and punishment.
Okay. Pat, what percentage of youth held last year were considered dangerous?
I wouldn't classify dangerous more than maybe serious felonies.
Okay.
We have about 25% of the kids that come through our facility are there for felonies, and there's harm against the community, and they need to be held accountable. And generally, those kids are held in detention pending court.
Okay, but then the other 75% are?
Well, there is about 40% of those other kids are what we call gross misdemeanors or misdemeanor kind of offenses, kind of the middle of the road, still committing harm to the community and need to make amends. And then the other percentage is probation violations. A lot of kids that have been on probation, they violate some terms of probation, for example, maybe getting kicked out of school or not going to treatment. And so they come to court, they have a probation violation hearing, and then are held.
Okay. What kind of consequences? Obviously, there are negative consequences being put in jail, but what are some of those unintended consequences when you put a youth through the system?
Judge, you want to answer?
Yeah, negative consequences, particularly with these 75% of the kids that Pat was talking about that are more low-risk offenders and probation offenders. We made a policy some time back in Clark County, unlike some counties, what we call status offenders, we don't incarcerate. Kids that are there for truancy, for example. Many counties will incarcerate kids for not going to school as part of that accountability. We made a decision not to do that some time ago and have programs for that. But the harm that you do when you mix these populations sometimes is you have these low-risk offenders, kids who may have not gone to treatment, may have gotten in trouble at school, and you mix them with the more serious felon population, and some of them are doing some substantial harm. You're bringing these groups together that maybe wouldn't be together out in the community, and they learn from each other. And there are a number of studies that have shown by combining those populations, you actually lead to having kids progress further in their criminality and harm to the community. And that's part of what this whole JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, is about.
Okay. And just so we can kind of keep costs, what is the average cost to keep a youth?
Well, it's a detention center, so it's a 24/7 operation, just like an adult jail. We have staffing, it never closes, so it's pretty expensive. It's about $150 a day to house a youth in our detention center.
And how much did it cost to operate the Justice Center in last year?
Because of all those things I said, it's about a $5 million budget for our detention program. They do a lot of great programming in there. I mean, they screen youth as they come in, mental health screening, all sorts of assessments are being done, referrals are being sent. So it's a dynamic place. We have staff that are well trained, doing a good job, but it's about $5 million.
Okay. Scott, at the start of the interview, we saw footage back in January that launched the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative here locally. First, is there an acronym for this?
Yes, Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, JDAI.
JDAI. Okay, and is this a national initiative?
It is. It got started with the Annie Casey Foundation. They were seeing, if you remember back 20 years ago or so, there was a real push to holding kids that were doing criminal acts accountable, much like adults. And the Annie Casey Foundation was seeing that maybe that was not having a positive effect and helping out holding 14-year-old because they do a robbery like an adult. So they were the initiators and the initial funders of this and started these programs. Now they've expanded across the nation and the state of Washington. We currently have 9 programs, I think, here in Washington.
Oh, okay.
So this is a national movement initiative that is growing bigger each and every year.
And has it been successful?
Yes, there have been multiple studies that have been done on it and have across the board shown success when this formula, so to speak, when I say formula, I'm a little hesitant saying that, but they have a system and a process that we're going through, I think we're going to talk about a little further, that you individualize to your community and your community needs and what will best serve, but it's still nonetheless kind of within this formula, and that's why they're providing that support to help us through that process that we get to individualize.
Okay, and is this the main reason this was started in Clark County, because of the success rate?
Well, I remember speaking with presiding judge Barbara Johnson a couple of years ago and trying to figure out how could we better serve young kids, lower risk offenders. And as the judge mentioned earlier, we don't want to mix those high risk and low risk kids up. So when I talked to her about this initiative and the theme of it, she understood it, and she took it to the Superior Court judges, and I think they understand it as well.
Now, how will this get implemented in Clark County?
Well, it's sort of the train has left the station. We had that kickoff that you referred to earlier, and now we are broken down in 5 different groups, working groups, and we've asked staff and community members to be involved with that. And so each work group has a task to do, and they are going forward. An example of that is an alternatives to detention work group. What alternatives can we create for these lower risk offenders? Always having public safety in mind, but if they are amenable to make some changes, what can we do in collaboration with the community? And that's where we're at.
I want to go back and add something. It was really a no-brainer when Pat brought this to the Superior Court judges. One, we have such a fabulous juvenile court, and they are recognized throughout the state and the nation. And that's because of programs that Pat and Pat's predecessor, Ernie Veach White, had brought forward. The restorative justice program, our connections unit, that we don't lock up status offenders. There's all these different things in innovation. So when they came and brought this to us and they had studied it and looked into it. It was really easy for us to say, gosh, with the track record that juvenile court has been showing us over the past decades under the leadership, if they think it's a good idea, they've been right every time so far. So it was real easy to get behind it as a court and say, we'll go forward with it, and then we continue, especially as we move it forward, be involved and an integral part of that. But it was easy to jump on board with our juvenile court.
Okay. Pat, you were talking about the 5 different groups working on issues. What types of community participation is there? I mean, what groups are involved in these, representatives are involved in these groups?
Well, we've contacted the schools and the superintendents, all 9 school superintendents in Clark County support and endorse this initiative. And we went to law enforcement, talked with the chief of police, Gary Lucas, and he's on our committee and understands this. Tony Golick, our county prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And we have DSHS, our local area administrator. Bill Paresa's on. So we really went out in the community and said, who are the key people out there that can help us with this, kind of moving it forward and making it a true collaboration.
What's kind of the time frame? How long will it take to get this program rolling?
Well, it's rolling.
Okay.
We're looking at least 3 to 6 months to really kind of get programming. We're in the process phase right now, and then we're going to be in the program phase. And so we have these work groups putting together and trying to come up with some ideas.
Going back, we've been at it about a year from when it first started, and we've been studying it and looking at it, and we've been to Multnomah County, for example, which is a model site for JDAI, been to Spokane, been to Pierce County. We went to Albuquerque for a few days, a model site, and get information from them and learning a lot about it ourselves, so as we go forward on this, we can duplicate. I mean, part of this is plagiarism at its highest form, and that is duplicating successful models that have done well, so we'll be successful. So that's been going on. Now we've got these subgroups. Not only the executive committee that Pat was talking about, is these subgroups reach far in the tentacles. Out of that meeting that you taped in January, our kickoff meeting, out of that 150 people, I don't know, it was like 40 or 50 of them volunteered to be on subgroups here of these, and so we are far reaching into the community with community involvement as we bring this forward and develop it.
And if I can just add one thing to that, Jim, it really aligns with our balance and restorative justice philosophy. Having these alternative, we really wanted to make sure it worked with offenders as well as victims and the community. And those are the 3 components that we looked at and said, we're going to go forward with this because it makes sense and it follows our philosophy.
Is there an overall cost estimate on what you think it would take to make these changes?
Yeah, there's not really it actually kind of aligns with the county's reconfiguration kind of initiative, doing things differently. So it wasn't to save money, it was what can we do to service kids in the community better, and hopefully with better outcomes, and allocating our services, our staff in a different kind of way, and hopefully having better results.
And the other last thing on that is what JDAI programs have shown is not necessarily an immediate cost savings, just more bang for your buck in this reconfiguration alignment, but where they are showing cost savings is substantial cost avoidance. Across the country, there are all these facilities that we're going to have to build new juvenile detention facilities that cost millions of dollars, and then the staffing with these. If you're able to bring down that population with no increased risk to the community and harm and better outcomes. So the future is where we're going to really save the money. Today we're going to have better results and outcomes that are more appropriate for our community youth.
And I know the process is still going, but what are some examples of things we might see, changes we might see?
Well, instead of housing these low-risk offenders that we've talked about, and we'll determine that by appropriate screening tool to figure out if they fall in that various programs, and they could be progressive. Could be day reporting with school, evening reporting, because some kids really need the supervision during that evening time because maybe parents' work schedules. Some counties are using some GPS monitoring to know where your kids are at and where they're going, and you can see if they go where they shouldn't be going. So various programs of that nature. We haven't developed the programs yet. That's what we have a subgroup is just beginning to look at and study to see what type of some mental health programs some communities have had, because there's usually a fair amount of mental health issues tied with these type of offenders.
Okay. Well, it sounds like an exciting program. If people want more information about the changes taking place, where can they check?
I would just contact the Clark County Juvenile Court and contact Jody Martin directly, and her number is on their sheet. And so there's a website. Just shoot us an email, and we would love to have your involvement.
Great. Well, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.